This lecture has been made available to you courtesy of the American Numismatic Society.
I want to thank the organizers for your very generous inclusion of me here today. Great honor to be in your midst to celebrate the contribution of Rick. And it's especially welcome to me because it allowed me to reconnect with Oliver Hoover. Oliver, as you may have noticed, has a degree from McMaster, 2 degrees from McMaster. In fact, I taught him. And not only did I teach Oliver Hoover at McMaster, well, it wasn't all that many years ago. It was actually a shocking number of years ago. But no, he was a child. I was a child. He was actually in the first class that I taught at McMaster, not merely the first course, but when I walked into the room on the first day teaching at McMaster, there were 2 students. I was there early. There were 2 students in the room, as I remember it, and Oliver was one of them. And then a few students came in later. So Oliver is quite possibly the very first student I ever taught at McMaster. And so it is a great, I regard it as a great honor to be delivering this today. And obviously that's why he wore a tie. Anyway, so I'm new amongst numismatists, and I was talking to a colleague about, well, I'm nervous, new people, and they said, well, you have to have a captatio, and he suggested a joke, and I said, well, I don't know any jokes, and so he told me a joke, and I'm going to tell it to you. And so the story is that when Pope John Paul II came to Southern Ontario some years ago, he was at a function in Niagara Falls, and it had run late, and he was on the way back in a chauffeur-driven limousine back to Toronto for another function, and he was running late. And he began to be concerned that he was running late. And so he pulled down the screen between the driver, spoke to the driver and said, listen, can we go faster? I'm going to be late. And the driver said, well, no, I can't speed. That's against the law. And it would be a sin given that the Pope is in the back. And the Pope said, well, as far as the sin goes, I can fix that for you. But the driver was adamant, the chauffeur was adamant, he would not break the speed limit with the Pope in the automobile. So finally the Pope said, well, listen, I'll tell you what, why don't you get in the back and I'll drive? And the driver didn't have any objection to that, and so they swapped places, and the Pope starts roaring down the freeway that that goes between Niagara Falls and Toronto, and in fact it goes right through Burlington, near where Oliver lives. And right there, as it happened, the chauffeur went through a speed trap and was pulled over by a policeman. So the policeman, who was on a motorcycle, waddled up to the door as it was, and the window went down, darkened window, and he looked in and saw the Pope was the driver, and he didn't say a word, went back to his motorcycle and called in and asked to speak to the duty sergeant. And duty sergeant comes on, and he says, well, I've got a situation here. I've pulled over someone really important. And the duty sergeant said, well, it doesn't matter, you have to give them a ticket. And he says, I don't think you know how important. And the duty sergeant said, well, what, you pulled over the mayor? And he says, no, more important than that. What, a cabinet minister? No, more important. What, the prime minister? No. And the officer said, well, let me put it this way. The Pope is his chauffeur. Um, well, anyway, so let's maybe move on to the more serious part of our talk. You should be able now to see that, and you can see the pencil there, I hope. And yeah, it's complicated logistics here. So today we're considering a coin that has, I think, produced what looks to me like a fairly intractable historical problem. That is, our epigraphical, archaeological, and textual evidence suggests fairly clearly that Atarneus perished at the end of the 2nd century or beginning of the 1st, and the coin has been dated either under the late triumvirate or Augustus or even later. Now, the evidence for the demise of Atarneus has been well traversed, and you can see important passages in the handout. So handout number 1, Pausanias describes how the city of Myus was abandoned owing to environmental factors. And then at the end of this long description reports, and this is underlined for you, a similar fate happened to the people of Atarneus. And, you know, so when Pausanias is writing under the Antonines, well, 2 passages of Pliny come into play here. Pliny includes Atarneus in a list of cities that that had perished, and in book 37, describing a gemstone, he mentions that it's found at Atarneus, which is now a village, but had once been a town, now a pagus, but had once been a town. And so, given that Pliny's sources are usually thought to be generally thought to be Augustan or maybe even earlier. That suggests that the city had been dead already sometime in the 1st century BC. The epigraphical evidence, handout number 4, is similar. There's no epigraphical reference to Atarneus after the Lex Portorii of Asiae, where it is one of the ports at which one can register imports and exports. But of course, nothing in epigraphy or numismatics, I suppose, is ever simple. There's a lot of controversy about this particular clause. It's fairly clear that it is that it was written earlier in the history of the province and subsequently revised. I'm sort of the view that Stephen Mitchell's discussion of this, which you see in handout number 5, is probably the most accurate. And he would put it, the clause, at the various earliest years of the province. So let's call this, 120 or thereabouts. And then the archaeologists in handout number 6, and this could be expanded a little bit, tend to put the end of occupation from archaeological evidence at the end of the 2nd century BC. And so taking all of this together, it all seems to point to the end of Atarneus coming either at the end of the 2nd century or the beginning of the 1st. Now, this is difficult to square with today's coin, which you can see in handout number 7, 8, and 9. It exists in 3 specimens that I know of. And the text for them, for all of these, you can see in number 10, where we have number 10, where the name is consistently reported as Asinius and his office Anthupatos Romaion. Now, the name of the proconsul is the same in all three publications, Asinius, but identifying him is never proven to be easy. The family tree you can see in handout number 12. And here I can just maybe the handout number 12 sketches out the family's history from the late Republic through the Julio-Claudians, and it's striking, not merely how many people have come involved. Everyone with an asterisk has at some point or other been suggested as a potential identification. But also, this is a family we know better than most in the late Republic, right? So the family first sort of enters our vision with Harius Asinius, who was a general during the Social War. But here, the important thing is he was a general on the wrong side. He was a general of the Italian allies, which of course means he can't be a Roman proconsul, and of course very difficult to imagine that his son could be either. Of course, the career of Asinius Pollio is a famous one, and he was recognized as a novus homo, a new man, a new entrant to politics, which sort of places that generation as being the earliest possible identification. Not easy. There are features of the coin, and we'll return to these, that suggest earlier dates. And of course, by the time Pollio is involved in politics, Pollio and his brother are involved in politics, the city, according to the other evidence, should probably have been gone. So how to solve this problem? Well, others have noticed this, and I think some either just suppose that the city lasted longer than our evidence, and that's not impossible, or Michael Grant took the rather excessive solution, cut the Gordian knot by, and you can see this in handout number 13. His solution was to reassign the coin to nearby Adrametium, thereby making a mistake that I like to call the Pope's chauffeur. That is, taking something that is out of place or unusual or strange, and finding a way to explain it by manufacturing in your mind something that is even stranger or unusual. But of course, instead of questioning the origin of the coin with Grant, much better, I think, just to turn back to the coin itself. And you can see the obverses there in your handout, where, I think you can see the verses there in your handout, sort of. Verses here in your handout where, fairly clearly this is the typical iconography of Atarneus with a half horse leaping and a coiled snake over his back, and then a monogram in which we have an A and a T, and then there's a row there as well. And I think that one might point out as well that at least some of this mistake for some of the mistake that Grant, for example, made was just, eased a little bit by, kind of mischaracterization of the monogram, the crossbars of the alpha do not touch. I think that's really clear in all three examples. And Grant, of course, can imagine, I think, that he's got an alpha, a delta, a rho, and an upsilon in his monogram. But that upsilon I don't think is possible if you actually look at the image. So let us maybe turn to the coin itself and the specimens itself, and the sort of the discussion tends to have been dominated by the copy in Paris, the specimen Paris, which is handout number 15. And the name, of course, Anthuptu Romaeon, and the name is up here, and I think it's fairly easy to see. Alpha Atarneus, right? But the question really is, what is this letter here? And if we zoom in, and you want to all kind of zoom in on your PDF. There it is. And I think what the first people saw was there is something here that looks like it could be a sigma. But in fact, whatever this is across here, it continues here, right? There's a little end of a dot there. So I think this and this, it looks more like a tau to me anyway. And if we maybe slip down to the next handout, and all of these images now, I mean, the internet is a wonderful thing. This is a photograph that was taken by the British Museum of its specimen. And again, it's one of these, an example. It's not easy to see what is there, a lot easier, with the other coin in mind. But here again, all right, here we've got our new. Sorry. Okay, here is our new. And I think that as I looked over this, I can see pretty clearly the tau in there. And, you know, and letters above, which of course is a surprise to some. And then, you know, I had this all written up, this paper, and had reached out to the British Museum about their copy, and they did this picture. And then they pointed out that, in fact, there has been recently a new specimen has surfaced that is the next item in your handout. And there is the surprise. And of course, once we know that it's there, it's not too hard to see these letters. In the first line, there's a prinum in there, Gaius, Gaiu, of course, which rules out Grant's proposed identification, and the father of polio, who are both Gnaii, rules them out. It's Gaius. But here again, I think we see, so here's our I, and I think we see what is the remains of a tau there. And so the name isn't Asinius, I think it's Atarneus. And then I think a lot of the ways in which this coin was a little bit difficult to explain resolve themselves. So he is in fact, Thupatos Romaeon, but is to be identified as Gaius Atarneus Labeo, who governed Asia in 122 and 129. Now, as 122 and 121, and his date is secured by Christophorus with his name on it, that's dated to the year of the 13th year of Ephesus. And that's handout number 15. Let's go here. So there's handout number 15. Line 3 and 4, he is Anthupatos Romaeon. And of course, Anthupatos Romaeon is itself a noteworthy line, you know, describing a proconsul as a proconsul of the Romans, is a formula that has a history. It's actually super common. I've laid out a table for you in the, sorry, I've lost my place here.
Who's your place?
Yeah. Table of epigraphical examples in number 20 of your handout. You know, I have sort of, in epigraphy, we have sort of 50 some examples of this formula. Down to, you know, the beginning of Asia, there's about half of them. Down to about Sulla is about another half of them. But really, we only have one epigraphical example after Sulla, where it's pretty clear that somebody is Anthupatos Romaeon, who dates from this period. And I'm not entirely confident that he shouldn't be dated earlier as well, but that's another problem. And of course, Atarneus also appears in a gold stater of Ephesus of the same year, which you have there in your handout number 19. It is, I think, noteworthy that proconsular coinage itself is it's not a common phenomenon, and our sense of it is dominated most by this famous group of coins that Metcalfe has recently worked up again. That is beginning in about 58. Many coins in Asia have governors' names on them. They seem to be part of a program. The program seems to be imperial, because we also find the same phenomenon in both Bithynia and Cilicia. But this isn't apparently part of that. This seems to be its own thing. So if we exclude the governors of Asia, and I would be inclined to take Atarneus, who's a famously problematic piece of this puzzle. I think it's not too hard to make him the last member of that group of, well, let's call them Metcalfe's coins. And then the other three proconsular coins that we have, that is coins that name proconsuls, all belong to Atarneus. That is, there is that Ephesian Christophorus there. There is this Ephesian gold stater that we've just looked at, and there's their bronze of Atarneus. And then, of course, the other element of this is that all of them seem to include a caduceus in them. That's quite prominent, of course, in our bronze, but it seems to be jammed into that Ephesian Christophorus of 122, 121, which I mean, it doesn't look like it belongs, and I think it's all the more striking that it has been included there. And then it's also sort of gets, and here let's zoom in. In this gold stater that David French published, there it is, kind of snuck in next to Artemis's leg. So I think that that the reading they offer for this coin is well supported, and it doesn't leave any, I think, any sort of papal chauffeuring that needs to be done as we try to put it in its context. And I'll maybe take some questions if there are any.
Okay. Well, there are some questions. Can you?
Yeah, let me just. Yeah, I will.
It is a sinew.
Okay. Okay, Eleni sees a sinew. I see a tau there, but and I think the Atarneus is impossible prosopographically. I mean, I suppose it's in some ways though.
Yeah.
Claude, if I can ask you a question, because exactly so, if this is Atarneus, and as we saw, some of the attendees do not see the same letter. But if this is Atarneus, because Atarneus would place this issue around exactly the last part, let's say the second half of the 1st century BC, which is basically when we see the names of Roman magistrates appearing, for example, I mean, in Bithynia, as we just saw, and several other things. While in case you see it as Atarneus, this is really incredibly important, because this would be the first time we have the name of a Roman magistrate on the bronze coinage, and civic bronze coinage in, because I mean, the Ephesus Sistophorus of Atarneus is 112 BC. So which means if it's the same, we're saying that already at the end of the 2nd century BC, we would have Roman magistrates, at least one Roman magistrate, signing civic issue. So for us, I mean, this is really important, actually, if your reading can be confirmed. So I mean, thank you. Just more than a question would be, I mean, thank you for this paper, because you made food for thought. So thank you for this.
Yeah, I mean, it is strikingly out of place, and you know, a key observation I would make is that Atarneus in Asia is somebody, I mean, I'm sure we all wish we knew more about. He is possibly sort of the first governor sort of in the new regime that was imposed by the Lex Sempronia. He's very early. You know, maybe we should imagine that this clause from the Lex Portoria, which must be somewhere in here, is also at this moment. We have these two other coins where he is mentioned, which is, I mean, it's quite striking that we only have these two groups of magistrates. And of course, from the, you know, the other side that I probably should mention at this point is, it's remarkable just how full our knowledge is of the governors of Asia of the late Republic. That is, we know them all. They're all pretty securely dated. There's one or two places where there might be a wiggle room that one could slip somebody else in there. But, you know, from like the mid 60s down to about 40, the fasti of Asia is full. So it's not merely that we don't have an Atarneus that we can kind of slip in there, but we actually don't have any spots to slip them in. And this is a period about which we know an awful lot about from Roman prosopography. That is, you know, we know most of the praetors.
Okay. No, really. It's also, to me, would be very interesting, because in the period of Atarneus, we do have, exactly in those years, we have a spike, a huge spike in the production of Sistophori, at least of Pergamon and Ephesus, as far as I could tell from the hordes, the big horde I studied. And so, and of course you have the gold stater. So it would be interesting, if this reading is confirmed, to imagine that really in that moment, really in those years with Atarneus, so we are talking about the 110th BC, you really have, for reasons we really don't know, a big spike in the production, and even such an early intervention at this point of Roman magistrates in the production of civic bronze. So this is, for me, this would be really interesting. So anyway, thank you really for this paper.
Well, there is another question from Noah. Claude?
Okay.
Yeah, I see it. I'll read it aloud so I can both. So you deal so nicely, thank you, with the catecheus, and perhaps the serpent doesn't need any more chauffeuring because it appears on earlier issues of Atarneus. Okay. However, there is a well-established iconography of snakes in the Telephus cycle, and you are squarely within his mythological kingdom there in Lower Caicus. Oh, thank you. Yes. That's a little out of my province, but obviously I'll need to include that in my thinking.
Okay. Any more questions?
Can I just ask one? Well, it's not really a question, Claude. It's more of a comment on your discussion about the problem about the monogram.
Yeah.
As it happens, for the last couple of years, I've been struggling through the coins of Northwestern Asia Minor for the next handbook, and I've been looking at these coins, and you might want to know that on the earlier Civic series, there is a very similar monogram that appears, and I think this would contribute further to your case.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think, you know, the idea of transferring the coin somewhere else, you know, really hasn't taken off. I don't think there's anybody that's followed up on this. It doesn't seem to me to be a very good idea, and you know, one wants to always admit that nothing's impossible, but you know, once you're coming up with these kinds of solutions, especially, you know, it's not actually easy to get an Asinius into the proconsulate until 8 BC, when we know that 5 BC, when we know the consul of 8 was proconsul. And he has coinage, right? So, but can we bring the coin that far down? Now, hopefully someday I can track down this new coin, and it might be that with slightly different photography, the name will be clearer.
More questions? No? Well, in this case, thank you very much, Claude, for so much and so well documented talk with deep prosopographical research.
Thank you for watching the American Numismatic Society's YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like our online resources, publication, and events, you can support the Society by becoming a member. And don't forget to check out our book and eBay stores. The links are below.